Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Another live stream here where we're live on Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube. I think that's it. The list is getting longer and longer. That's how we do it today in content marketing and trying to reach our audiences. Everybody's creating content. So I'm always pleased to hear what everybody else is doing in B2C marketing. Every year, I think it's every year, Content Marketing Institute publishes a report on what's new in B2C, how are they creating content, what are they bringing in-house, what are they doing, what are the latest strategies, et cetera, et cetera. And I can share the link with you, and it is in the show notes where you can read the full report. Robert Rose actually did an article that published just a little bit ago, a couple minutes ago, right? Like 2 minutes before the show, I had enough time to read it. But let's talk about what's new, what do we need to think about? And I'm pleased to have Stephanie Stahl on the show. She's the GM over at the Content Marketing Institute. And I don't know, I've known her for a number of years. I'm not supposed to say how long, as Mark Schaefer told us on the show the other day, because that makes me look old. But let's get her out of the green room here. I'm pleased to have her on the show. First time. Stephanie, thanks for joining us.
So happy to be here. There's something a little bit surreal about seeing you here, my watch telling me Christoph Trapp is live, and my phone dinging saying Christoph Trapp. It's like all these things are happening at once, and it's great to be here. Good morning.
Good morning. Bright and early, 7 a.m. here in the Chicago time zone. You're on the East Coast, though, so a little later.
Yeah, a little bit later, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I couldn't help but notice that Washington football helmet and hat back there behind you. Even better. All right.
I took that off. So I actually, as you might know, so my next book is launching March 10th, how to go live, why you should do it, et cetera, et cetera. And so one section will be, how do you dress on lives? Like what should you wear? And when I go speak, as you know, I used to wear a suit, and then I got a little bit more casual, but it was still pretty much a suit. And now I'm on these live shows and I'm wearing winter hats, T-shirts. It depends. The marketing answer to all marketing questions. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. How do you dress on a live? I think you wear whatever. And yeah, go Washington. Lifelong fan.
Awesome. That's great. I feel the love here in DC. That's great.
Awesome. Well, I keep my hat on just for you. Tell us about the research and remind people why do you do it every year and what's new this year?
Yeah, so this is our 11th annual Benchmarks, Budgets, Trends in Content Marketing. And we do a B2B cut, we do a B2C cut, we do some industry cuts as well. Today, we're excited to be releasing the B2C version. And much like what we saw with B2Bs, and the survey, we did this in July. So we were pretty well into the pandemic, right? So we were seeing a lot of changes, a lot of content changes, a lot of marketing changes, some dramatic, some more dramatic than others. But essentially, we saw changes in editorial calendars, changes in messaging, changes in strategy that really, I think, will be lasting. And when I say that, I say, in B2C, live streaming. There was a tremendous increase in live streaming. That shouldn't surprise you, right? Because you're a pro at this, but we saw a fairly sizable jump from about 13% last year to 35% in this survey. And I think as we're all in this digital world and we're all getting more comfortable, all realize that this human connection that you can get on video and visual storytelling is priceless. And so it was very interesting to see that change.
I agree on the whole live streaming, of course. I mean, I go live every day pretty much. The other day I live streamed me snow blowing my driveway, and a few hundred people watched that. I don't know why, but they did. I like to think these conversations are more interesting. But the other thing, it is a human connection, right? Because it's really for a long time when we're on air, right? People either will like us or they won't like us. And so I think that's really great. But what are people doing when it comes to live streaming? I mean, are they doing these talk shows, or they doing product reviews, or like, how do they make it interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it's all across the board, really. Lots of variety. A lot of this, a lot of just having conversations, just human conversations about any number of things. And in those cases, we all get a healthy dose of see personality and personality of people behind brands. And I just think that's so valuable. It's great. I mean, the other interesting big change that we saw too was just B2Cs building communities. And it's the same sort of thing where there's such a need and a desire to want to engage with an audience. And there's no shortage of content and live streams and, white papers and graphic, there's no shortage of content out there. But if you can build your own community and engage that way, I mean, of course, that I know that's not surprising, to hear from somebody from the Content Marketing Institute, because we're all about building audience. But that was a pretty interesting change too, in terms of the numbers really going up there.
So what's interesting about the community part too is, I mean, there's different types of communities, right? I mean, now we have Facebook groups. I know Content Marketing World has one, and there was a good discussion happening in there during Content Marketing World, especially last year, and even now still. You got the weekly Twitter chat. We had Mark Zohar on the show. They're trying to build communities on websites. And of course, my first comment was, in the blogs, in the comments, it's like they're just a cesspool. I mean, who wants to read them? But at the end of the day, we do have to build those digital communities because, I mean, with COVID, I'm not even leaving this place at all. I'm just right here. So so what have you seen? How do people build communities, and how do people not get overwhelmed? I mean, I'm thinking about Zoom meetings. If somebody says you want to do a Zoom happy hour, and I'm like, are you kidding? I just had 8 hours of Zoom calls today. I'll go sit on the couch and make my own cocktail by myself. So how do we build a community online, and at some point it needs to extend back into the offline world, right, where we see each other again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's kind of what we're trying to do too with Facebook. So we started a community for Content Marketing World attendees when we had our digital event in October, and we've tried to keep it going. We can't just be sort of a one and done, right? So we had a very vibrant, active community during the show, but now we're using that as a place to live stream each week, where we take a track that was held at Content Marketing World, and we invite the speakers from that track to come in, and we talk about it more. And it's a way to encourage people to also go back and watch those sessions on demand if they didn't see them the first time around. But it's important to keep the community active and going, and enticing people to want to keep coming back. So I think that's important. I mean, we've seen all in the B2C world, we've seen all sorts of communities in healthcare and fitness and beauty and places like that, where people can come together and share tips. They can learn new ways of doing things. They can talk to like-minded peers, all sorts of things that, make you feel like you have a connection to someone, when otherwise, like you said, we're just here. We're just here, during this pandemic. So why not connect with people who are like-minded?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing too is, I mean, your reports always talk about efficiency and implementation. And I am a big fan of doing that. And one thing I love these live streams, and of course you already talked about some live streaming things you found. So I'm literally finishing my book, right? Which is a lot of articles that I already wrote about, and I re-spin them basically and add transitions and whatever. But I'm also adding things from live streams, like, so I'll quote you in the book, just because I'm literally writing it right now. So I'm trying to make my content creation very efficient. And I know you guys talk about that all the time in your research. What have we found that are people making it easier? Are people still going through approval hell? Or, is it still the hassle it was 10 years ago? Or how is it becoming easier if it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll hear a mix of opinions on that, depending on the maturity of the organization. But there's no question about it. Content marketing and effective content marketing isn't just about creating lots of content, lots and lots and lots of content. Anybody can do that. It's about creating great content, but it's also about content operations and being able to scale. And sometimes that means figuring out the best ways to reuse content, to repurpose it, and to stop just creating things from scratch when you've got a lot of great content that might not otherwise be seen. I mean, I don't know what there's stats out there. Other people have done research on this, but the amount of content that's created that's never actually seen is astounding. So organizations really do have to have an effective operation going on to make sure that doesn't happen. So
Yeah, and it's very true. And let's talk about the operation in a minute. But first, I know you mentioned live streaming already. Big shout out to Restream. I do live stream with them. I don't know if you can read that URL, restream.io/join/C-Trap. And then to top it off, in case you guys are wondering how I produce these live streams, I use Switcher Studio. Let me show this to you on the screen. So I got Stephanie and myself right here on the iPad. It's my little studio. And so every time I look down, I'm not just tweeting away. I'm actually producing the show. I'm muting her. I'm muting myself, depending on when I hear a cat meow in the background. So, but it's become very, very efficient, even though it's kind of stressful when you first get started. One of the things you talk about, the size of B2C content marketing teams, increasing, decreasing, bringing things in-house. What have we learned there? Are people bringing more things in-house, or what's the mix?
Yeah, definitely bringing things more in-house. In the article that you mentioned that we put up on our website just moments ago too, that Robert Rose has written, he talks about this very thing, that this growing trend of bringing this type of operation in-house. And that doesn't mean that, B2Cs have huge content marketing teams. They don't. Generally, they're relatively small, but they're part of a broader team, of course. And trying to have more control over great content and ways to build loyalty with an audience is part of that reasoning for bringing it in-house. So yeah, definitely a trend there. Definitely. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. And there is some things I think you can easily outsource, like, for example, strategy, pushing things forward. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I still see. There's so many hurdles internally sometimes. So literally when you bring somebody in just to kind of help you get started, actually can help because you don't have all those internal connections. But from a production perspective, I think it can be a lot easier to do it when you're always engrossed in the content. You understand the brand. You're working with everybody in the brand. You hear, like, for example, today I have a meeting with the product team, here at Vox Pop Me in a little bit. And basically, I'm probably not going to do anything with that content, but it gives me more ideas that may helps me. People asking for what's going on in the market. And if I'm just I'm overstating it a little bit, but if I'm the Fiverr writer, and I just get the brief, I really don't have that background.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that evolves. Kind of interesting. I also have I've worked with all different sizes of teams now, and I'm pretty sure nobody ever has a big enough team, right? I mean, whether it's 5
Never.
people or 20 people or 60 people, they always say, "Oh, we don't have enough people." I'm like, you have 60 people working on this stuff. How can you not have enough people? It's kind of crazy, but it's true. So how do we? What's your advice on how do you build your internal team? How do you get started? Like, who do you start with?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I asked this very question of a lot of companies that I talk to. acquiring what they're looking for, what skill sets are they looking for. And so often, there's a mix of, some brands love to go and hire former journalists, for example. Journalists are good at creating content. They're good at creating objective content. They're good at interviewing. Some will go looking for skill sets now, increasingly, with video. Do you have video skill sets? Because visual storytelling is so important. And are you comfortable creating video content? Are you comfortable being on a live stream? That sort of thing. Content creation, editing, marketing, and video skills could give you a really awesome team. Even a small, an awesome small team if necessary, which is usually the case. As you said, we have all the people we need, said no marketer ever, so, but that could be a pretty solid team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just kind of looking through I was trying to share my screen, guys, but for some reason that is not working today. I don't know why, but you can check out the report in the links. But it's interesting too, content marketing activities, B2C organizations still outsource. And the biggest piece is indeed content creation. And here's why I'm surprised and not surprised by that. Here's why. Because first of all, that does take a lot of time, right? So today, I have the whole day blocked off to actually write a couple articles. And it's going to take that long. And here's the other thing. People will see sometimes that I have the whole day blocked off. They say, hey, you don't have any meetings today. Can you join me for this meeting? I'm like, no, I'm writing this article, and it does take time. So I can see that. But on the other hand, it can also be a challenge when you outsource it, because how do they know what you already have? How do they know how to integrate it, right? And I think it was Andy Crestadina who talked about you should create less content. You should take your old content and update it. And I do that all the time now. I just published an article yesterday, 1,800 word article. I wrote 200 new words because I didn't have to. I could just update the article. So do you see that shifting down the road too, that more of the actual creation comes in-house? There's still, I know it's shifting already, but there's still a big chunk of people doing it in-house.
Yeah, no question about it. And we're huge fans of that kind of repurposing. We do that all the time too. We'll take an older article that was highly popular and update it, because we don't need to recreate it completely. And I like how you know exactly how many new words you had too. That's pretty impressive. But yeah, so the thing with content creation, what I see a lot of is brands have a set or a network of freelancers, or maybe certain people at an agency that they lean on for content creation. So in a lot of cases, that network, those freelancers are really extensions of the brand, and they know the brand. They know what's important in the content. They know the culture of the brand. So it's not simply just throwing it over the fence and saying, hey, I need some content on, B2C trends. There's a deeper relationship there. And this, of course, is where, those efficiencies that we were talking about earlier and content operations come into play, because it has to be driven by a brand strategy. And that strategy has to be made clear to those outsourced people, So I just find that, even with us, we work with a lot of the same editorial people, even if they're not part of our staff, but they know our brand so well that they can help create content that works for us.
So really the trick is that if you use outside people, make sure they understand your brand, make sure they understand your strategy. And then, I see your content, and some of it is written by freelancers, I guess, or outsourced resources, and they do a great job. And I've worked with some of them before. So, but they know your brand, right? In fact, sometimes I paused there for a second because I wasn't even sure if they were outsourced or who they were, right? Because they just kind of represent your brand. So it can certainly work. What other things did we notice in the in this study that's worth mentioning? I know we always talk about budgets. Top 5 challenges when seeking outsourced B2C content marketing help, budget issues. finding partner with adequate topic expertise. That's an interesting one, because when you come as a journalist, so I'm not an expert at anything other than asking questions. I like to think sometimes that goes better than others. But how important is the expertise in the actual subject matter area? And when you hire journalists, how do they learn it?
Well, I could make the case that, while it's great to always have subject matter experts for anything you might want to be creating content on, a good writer, a good journalist can do just about anything. As long as you're talking to the right people and you are doing your research. Let's face it, many journalists are not experts at one single thing. But if you've got the good journalistic skills, whether you grew up as a journalist in your career or not, if you've got good journalistic skills, then I think you could write about just about anything, or you could interview someone just about anything. So I don't think that is necessarily an issue. Other things that we saw that are maybe worth pointing out too, that, a lot of what B2Cs, when they look at performance and how they're measuring their performance and their successes, of course, there's, brand awareness. That's important, right? That's always important. But we did see, an interesting tick up, more than a tick in some cases, on establishing credibility and building loyalty. And so I think that's important when you're thinking about a content strategy and the type of content that you're putting out there. What is the intent? And we just saw such intent around credibility and loyalty. And in this purely digital world that we're in right now, it's so critical.
And what's interesting about credibility as well, I think when you do these live streams, right, it's so much easier to establish it, or even to lose it if you can't pull it off, right? And so if I'm just talking, it doesn't make any sense. At some point, people will say, this guy doesn't have any credibility. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just talking. He bought a mic on Amazon and, ring light, and now he thinks he's an expert or a podcaster. But this is actually, so I totally agree with you, Stephanie. I think journalists, they can interview people and then they can turn that into good content. What's interesting, though, is with the emergence of live streaming, we can do it live, and we can do it right now. And people don't necessarily, back in the day when we only did writing, there was some experts who would literally just pick everything apart, and it didn't sound anything like them. You've probably been in those situations. With live streaming, you take that out of it, right? Because you can hear them, you can see them, and you kind of get rid of that barrier. Of course, we always talk about content performance, and I know I'm always glad to see that in your research as well. And of course, my latest book, Content Performance Culture, talks about that specifically. Everybody always asks, "How's it working? Is it working? Is that good? How does that compare to other people?" What are we seeing when it comes to measuring success? I know you have a whole sections, how B2C marketers rate their organization's overall level of content marketing success. What have we seen there? Is it looking good, or what are people saying?
Yeah, certainly seeing improvements there. And, for many years, the sort of biggest stickler for so many brands, B2B and B2C, was that very thing you just said. Well, how do we know if this is working? How can we justify the investment when the executive team is saying, why are we spending so much money on content? How can we prove it? And so through the years, it has become critical. And, different brands have different metrics, right? It may be, engagement, sharing of the content, time on a website, time or sharing on a video. Everybody has, different things that are important to them. But the most important thing is to document those right up front. Like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish with this content? Is it simply raising awareness of our brand? Is it converting people to do something else with our brand? Whatever it is, brands need to know. They need to have it written down, and all content needs to be created with all of that in mind. So it's becoming, there are all sorts of tools now. And this better than I do when it comes to some of the tools and things out there for measurement. But there are all sorts of ways that make this a lot easier. Making is worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting too is factors B2C marketers attribute to their organization's content marketing success. In the last 12 months, we have the value our content provides, 77%, which is an interesting metric because like who decides that? It's funny because sometimes when I write something and somebody will edit it, I'm like, how do you know that will perform better? Like I literally just did research on, what might perform here. But interesting, website changes, search rankings, 49%. So that's of course still important, and that's going to be. I was just looking at something the other day. Somebody's website was ranking basically all the way down on the first page because all their competitors had ads on top of them. So search rankings are not what they used to be anymore. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing this research with us, for making the time bright and early on, I don't know what day it is, Wednesday, I guess. Who knows?
It's Wednesday.
And the link is in the bottom. How do people participate in this research? It's not like an open call for submissions, is it, right? Or how do you find people to participate?
No, we send out a survey, and we do it with a wonderful partner, Marketing Profs. Mm-hmm. And so we're surveying our audiences. So highly qualified, list database that we go out to. And that gives us the ability to trend from year to year. So.
Got it. Yeah. And that's always what I find interesting, of course, to see. You can see how it has evolved over the years. And how many years has it run now? I think you mentioned that earlier.
This is the 11th annual survey. Yep.
So that's always wonderful to see. But the online communities is relatively new, right? That you did not ask that in years past.
Right. We have, through the years, of course, we've changed it up a bit. Online communities, live streaming, for example, some of the newer trends that we add to it. Different social media networks, get added to it. With B2C's most popular, is Facebook. With B2B, not surprisingly, LinkedIn. But now we've got Instagram and we've got Snapchat and other things that, have come into play. TikTok, so we evolve the survey through the years to keep up with those trends. And of course, we're always looking for what's next.
And of course, we have to. 11 years, a lot of things have changed. And now we have Clubhouse. And if, in case you guys didn't see it, I just, this is actually the article I updated last night. Now, Twitter is rolling out Twitter Spaces, which is basically just like Clubhouse, except it's on Twitter. So my question is, why do I need Clubhouse if I can't just do it on Twitter, where I already have a community? So certainly it's hard to keep track. Stephanie, thanks for making the time. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
So happy to be here. Have a great day.
You too.